Wrestling Omakase brings you a full course meal of all of Japanese wrestling, men's and women's. Join me, a Japanese wrestling fan for over 20 years, along with a rotating cast of equally knowledgeable co hosts, as we cover everything from New Japan and Stardom to NOAH, All Japan, DDT, Tokyo Joshi, Mari Gold, Sendai Girls, Dragon Gate, GLEAT, Ice Ribbon, and even more stuff. If you're a fan of Japanese wrestling and you want coverage of the entire scene in one podcast, check us out right here on the Voice of Wrestling Podcasting Network each and every week. Get us wherever you get podcasts today.
Welcome back to the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Jesse Collings, and joining me once again, he is a returning guest. He is the host of the Emerald FlowShow here on the Voice of Wrestling Podcast Network, and he is, of course, our Hamilton, Ontario, Canada correspondent. It's Gerard Di Trolio. Gerard, how are you?
I'm doing good, Jesse. It's great to be back.
Yeah, Gerard, we're recording this on Memorial Day, which I was asking Gerard if they celebrate in Canada, which he told me that they don't. So I guess they just don't care about all the veterans that sacrificed their lives for freedom in Canada.
Well, we have a bigger what Veterans Day is November 11th in the States, right?
Yeah, that's
So,
like
so
international.
that's when we celebrate, like we call it Memorial or Remembrance Day
Yeah.
here, and that it's not a holiday per se, but it's when the veterans are celebrated.
Yeah, America has this is maybe gonna get me canceled. Like America has too many holidays that are just like celebrate America vaguely. With Memorial Day being one of them. Memorial Day is specifically for veterans who were killed in combat. And then Veterans Day is, specifically for anyone who is a veteran, is
Right.
my
Okay.
takeaway generally.
That makes sense. Yes.
But we don't have um really that big of a distinction on that anymore. And of course, we have the 4th of July, which is about America. We also have President's Day, which is also kind of about America. And we also have Flag Day, which is less popular, but we certainly learned about it in school, which is also about America, really just about the flag. So we've got like 8 holidays that are just like vaguely celebrating America. Like even like Thanksgiving is largely like a celebration of America in some way.
Right. I mean, look, I mean that really is most holidays in a lot of countries. But you know what we need more of is more just days that are called bank holidays, like in the UK. They're just like,
That,
nope, it's a day off.
yeah, we like kind of like functionally have those, but like they're like we give them some sort of purpose that people don't care about anymore. Like Labor Day is exists solely so people have like a fun week-long weekend as the summer is winding down. Like
Mhm.
I'm sure you're sympathetic to what I'm about to say here, Gerard, but do the people care about labor and labor union movements enough anymore? Probably not. When was the last time you heard about that discussion on Labor Day by somebody that like wasn't associated with the labor union?
That's a good question. You see like some media stories about it like every so often. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's just become like a uh by design partially. I could get into a whole history lesson about this, but I won't. But you know, there's certain reasons why, like North America, or at least in Canada, U.S. Labor Day is like that last weekend of August or first weekend of September or whatever, versus May 1st, which it is in like every other country on the planet, basically.
Yeah, well, May 1st is May Day, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. I got an email from our union rep telling me all about May Day earlier this month. Um, but anyway, we're not here to talk about holidays from the former British colonies. We're talking about Puro in Japanese pro wrestling. And I want to start by saying this. So I started following Japanese wrestling on a regular basis in, I would say, 2012. And so for the entire time since I started, really watching it, New Japan Pro Wrestling has existed both as the most successful, financially strongest company that draws the biggest crowds, but also really the top promotion in terms of quality, in terms of having the absolute best matches, in terms of having a loaded roster, in terms of kind of being a promotion that the other promotions were chasing both from a financial perspective and a content perspective. And there's been a lot of discussion, including on this podcast, about some of the faults with New Japan Pro Wrestling in recent years. But it wasn't until I watched a lot of the Champions Carnival this year. And it wasn't really until I got to the end of the Champions Carnival, and I've been watching some other Pro promotions throughout the year, and comparing that to New Japan, and I hit a point where I'm like, there's really not that big of a difference from a quality perspective between New Japan and some of these other promotions anymore. Where it used to be like even even a few years ago when New Japan had lost some key talent and some other guys like, Tanahashi and Naito had slowed down in the ring. It was still like, yeah, New Japan isn't what it once was, in like 2018 when it was, easily the best promotion in the world, but it's still a really high quality promotion that all of these other promotions in Japan are kind of chasing, at least from a quality perspective. But when I watched the Champions Carnival, and that's of course just all Japan, it's just one other promotion. We could talk about other promotions as well. But when I was watching it, I was like, you know what? The Champions Carnival is like probably had as many like 4-star and up matches as the G1 might have. And that's crazy to think about, like especially a few years ago, if you were looking at like the comparative rosters. And I still think New Japan has more depth than most of these other Puro promotions, although we'll talk about what depth really means. To me, especially coming off the Champions Carnival and kind of watching New Japan this year, I was like, I think All Japan is kind of close to New Japan from a quality perspective, which is like to me like a crazy notion, and thus it must be discussed and covered.
Yeah, I think you're on the right track there. Some of this is also like All Japan getting its act together after a pretty lackluster 2025 with way too much comedy, as people were complaining about, and I was too. And the ill-advised long Jun Saito Triple Crown reign, but they got it back onto Kento Miyahara, and Go Shiozaki joined the company. Like that's a huge part of it. That he was, very much responsible for the how good the Champion Carnival was this year, and also the return of Yuma Aoyagi from his suspension for driving with an expired license. And he just came back, like no nonsense, wrestled hard, no comedy BS or anything like that. So, I think it just says like, when a company wants to get its act together, it can, these days, it can obviously challenge, not directly or fully, but definitely give New Japan a run for their money. Whereas, like, we could also bring Noah into this conversation and say, well, in some ways, New Japan and Noah are very similar right now, for better and worse, right? And that's also like a symptom of where Japanese wrestling is right now.
Yeah, a lot of this definitely has to do, and I'm talking about like right in the immediate future. So like I'm not really concerned about like All Japan's 2025. Obviously, we can take a bigger picture and zoom out and say like, okay, what promotions are actually heading in like a real positive direction and which ones are kind of stuck in a more negative direction or are heading downhill quickly. But just watching it right now, and I was like, it really occurred to me, and I was like, I think so. The Champions Carnival was great because so you have the top guys, right? You have Kento Miyahara, who is the most stable, um, convincing conventional ace in the puro side of pro wrestling right now. In terms of just you know exactly what you're getting. He's incredibly reliable. The crowd is always into him. Just like the kind of the perfect kind of wrestler to be the top babyface in a promotion right now. Um, and then you have a couple of really interesting things happen. We talk about Go Shiozaki becoming available and kind of returning to All Japan Pro Wrestling and being really, really excellent. Because there's been times where he's not as good as he could be due to injuries and other reasons. But so far, he's been outstanding and really one of the few best wrestlers in the world since returning to All Japan. So that's obviously a huge get. You had in the back half of 2025, Yuma Anzai returned from a hiatus. Why was he gone? Do we have an explanation for that?
Oh yeah, we do. Well, he was a contestant on the Bachelorette Japan.
So was that the only reason he was gone?
Yes, as far as we could tell, because he was just gone for 2 months in the summer last year,
Yes. So
and
he
that's really
returns where
nothing
I
went
believe
up.
he just like lost in the finale on The Bachelorette.
That's right. He made it to the final two, and he lost in the finale. But I think in some ways that's the best case scenario because you don't want him publicly with someone. You know, you want to make it look like he's available. Bachelors.
Oh, old territory system, right? You
Oh,
can't have an
absolutely.
on-screen girlfriend because all the girls want to think they can bang him.
Yeah, I mean it's rare. Like you saw, like Okada announced his marriage and everything like that, but when he got married, but it's actually fairly common that they don't announce their relationship status, especially when they're sort of in their young prime. It's different when like someone like Hiroki Goto brings his family out after he wins the title finally and everything like that. But for someone that's under 30, you don't want to be seen with someone.
So Anzai comes back and he's been excellent. And then the most interesting one is probably Aoyagi, which you discussed. Um, can you briefly recap what happened to Aoyagi and kind of what has happened since and how he ended up at the Champions Carnival in the first place?
So a few months back, I don't want to say like I don't know, October, November maybe. He got in to a car accident where the guy was, I think, older, and he went to hospital, non-life-threatening injuries, nothing too serious. But it turns out that Aoyagi forgot to renew his license, and it had expired, and so this all got out, and so this being, still how they do things in Japan, he got basically suspended for 3 months at 50% pay. It took a 50% pay cut for those 3 months. And he had finally just come back, but had been not. He had finally just come back just before the Champion Carnival started, but he had not been announced in the Champion Carnival. But then Cyrus just went AWOL and apparently sent the money back to All Japan for his plane ticket or canceled his plane ticket, and they couldn't get in touch with him. So they put Aoyagi into the tournament, and I think that played a huge major role in why it was as good as it was this year.
Yes. And also, kind of prior to Aoyagi's suspension, he'd been kind of stuck in some sort of like low effort spiral downwards, where he had once been pegged and even featured as one of the top young stars in the company and had the Triple Crown title placed on him, but had somehow like reverted into like a mid-card comedy act kind of
Basically,
before the suspension.
yes.
And in a way, the suspension and then the sudden return, all because of Cyrus. Well, I can't remember what's Cyrus's full name.
Well, he sometimes goes by Cyrus the Destroyer.
Cyrus the Destroyer. That's right. That's what I was thinking of.
Mm.
Cyrus the Destroyer really was the catalyst to the return for All Japan's greatness because, in a way, this allowed Aoyagi to kind of reset his character into what he'd become, and he had a sensational Champions Carnival. So what kind of occurred to me, and I was going to write an article about this, but just super busy and time got away from me, and maybe I'll write it eventually. But I was thinking this when we're talking about All Japan in comparisons to New Japan. If you were to take the top four performers in All Japan from a like a performance and push perspective, and let's say right now it's Kento Miyahara, Yuma Anzai, Aoyagi, and Go Shiozaki. And you could argue that, like, well, Jun Saito had a long title reign, so maybe he's one of them. And Hideki Suzuki just won the Champions Carnival, so maybe he's one of them. That's fine. I think these four guys are clearly the
That's the
top.
four I
Yeah,
would go
yeah.
with as well. Yeah,
And if you were to compare them to the top four guys in New Japan, which I think there'd be a lot of debate about exactly who those guys are, which is part of the problem in New Japan.
sure.
But let's say it's probably Zack Sabre Jr. I think you'd have to say it's Callum Newman,
Yeah.
and then it's Yota Tsuji,
Hmm.
and then it's who's that fourth guy? Is it Shota
Goto?
Umino? Who'd you say?
Goto?
Gedo, I feel like if you were to add last year, but he's been pretty much face downwards, it
Well,
seems
so is
like.
Zack Sabre Jr.
Yeah, but Zach has these tag team main events and stuff like that.
Sure.
But it'd be I think that's part of the problem for New
Exactly.
Japan that it's not really that clear. But let's just say it's Uminu, just because I feel like that's probably the most logical choice.
Right.
Like, which four would you rather have to build your wrestling company around? Which four are better right now? Um,
Uh,
I don't
I
think it's
think,
close.
yeah, I think I would go with All Japan, although I mean we could do caveats on the All Japan side and say that Go's body is breaking, even though he knows how to still perform at a very high level.
Yes, he's
And
past his prime in a lot of ways.
yeah, and Aoyagi is a wild card because you don't know what you're going to get. And while he's
Yeah,
had great matches, I would trust that. I still would trust Kento and what Anzai has done in only. Oh, he's not even in the. He'll celebrate his fourth anniversary in the since his debut in September. I just think both of them are more reliably consistent than Aoyagi too. But
yeah,
Umino is also wildly inconsistent, and you could be like, well, he needs a Will Ospreay to bring out his best work or something like that, right?
yeah. Well, Aoyagi's like the very oft injured mercurial star of a sports team who has like finally is healthy and puts together like a good week of games. And you're like penciling him in for like an all-star bid again, and it's like I don't know if we could really trust Aoyagi. Like, no, he's back. Um, but the fact that it's a conversation, I think is really interesting. And that's kind of what started me thinking about this, where I was like, if I wanted to, and actually somebody asked me, somebody who said that they used to be a wrestling fan, they haven't been paying attention for a while, and they asked me, they're in the military, and they asked me, hey, like, I just actually, I got relocated to Japan. We're staying in Tokyo. I'm like a stone's throw away from the Tokyo Dome and like a bunch of all the venues. Like, should I go see All Japan? Should I go see New Japan? Like, what should I go see? Like that I'm here. And like normally I'd be like, oh yeah, like New Japan, they have a show at Korakuen Hall next week. You should go see that. Um, but I was like, I would say like, and I said like, I don't think there's a huge difference in the between their products right now in terms of like quality. Like if you, yeah, like Wrestle Kingdom was coming, I'd be like, yeah, make sure to go see Wrestle Kingdom. But just like right now, I'm like, I don't think there's that big of a difference. That kind of what started me thinking about this long coming off the Champions Carnival, and then I was started thinking about like who the top guys are. Um, now All Japan has a much smaller roster, and New Japan has a lot more depth, especially if you're going to talk about things like the tag team division or especially the
Right.
junior heavyweight division. Um, but each promotion also has kind of like its own dead weight, and
Sure.
when I watch a like if I'm gonna sit down and watch a full New Japan show versus watching a full All Japan show, I find New Japan's like dead weight in those matches to be way bigger slogs than the All Japan matches that are like of that don't feature necessarily the top talent.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things is that some of the All Japan dead weight has sort of departed. People like Yoshitatsu over the in the last couple of years. And it's funny because if you ask me which men's promotion has the most dead weight right now, I'd actually say it's Noah.
Yes. Well, we'll talk about Noah later. Noah doesn't really fit
Yeah.
into this conversation as well as All Japan does. There are some things going on in Noah that they have going for them that maybe New Japan would like to borrow, but um, for me, this is mostly an All Japan discussion.
Hmm.
Um, right, but like even like so, All Japan has like some of these guys that aren't very good, especially like coming on Champions Carnival, and you're watching like Zion Quinn wrestle. For whatever reason, they have these random like NXT washout guys that was Hideki Suzuki like was friends with these guys when he was randomly in NXT for a few years, and then he's like bringing them over. Or they Davey Boy Smith Jr.'s kid friends. Like, how did all these guys end up in the All Japan?
I It's got to be Hideki. Smith wasn't there, and now Smith seems to be gone and done with All Japan, which I'm not complaining about. Uh, Speaking of dead weight, so yeah, I'm pretty sure that this is all Hideki stuff, really.
Yeah, it's funny because there's so few like foreigners and especially like Americans that are working in Japan on a regular basis. Like it's really just like a handful of guys in New Japan. I don't know, are there any Americans working regularly in NOAH right now? I don't think so.
Americans, not technically on Noah's roster, actually. They uh, they pop in. Like someone like Titus Alexander is technically in Marvelous, but he works like some like Monday Magic Noah shows. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's like a lot of British and European guys right now.
Yeah, there's very few American guys like working in Japan, and it's very odd that like out of all of those American guys that could be working in Japan, um like Odyssey Jones is one of them.
Uh,
Uh,
well, it's probably a combination of like who they can get and who they can get for what they're offering them, basically.
and respect to these people like Odyssey Jones, or Zion Quinn, who we've seen a lot of these NXT washout guys. They don't really want to do the indies. They don't really want to do the grind. These guys are getting on that flight and going to Japan to try to make it in professional wrestling. So I give those guys a lot of credit, for that. And then the other aspect is like, while those guys are not particularly very good, um, their matches are relatively painless to watch. They're usually kept very simple. They never go very long.
No.
There's usually like at least a very like basic traditional approach. Like I think it was Aussie Jones versus Ray Saito, which like on paper to me sounds like an awful, awful match, but at least it was kind of fun. They did like these sumo like running at each other stuff outside the
Exactly.
ring. Um, and I was like, oh, this was kind of enjoyable given you're talking about like two very like athletically limited wrestlers. As opposed to like New Japan has all of the House of Torture stuff and just all these guys that just are really like unpleasant to watch their matches. And so like if we're gonna compare like the weakness aspects of their rosters, even though like New Japan has a lot more guys and like the All Japan guys aren't really that good, they're at least like relatively harmless to watch as opposed to New Japan where I'm like, this is like really hurting the product. Like I don't think Odyssey Jones is hurting the All Japan product at all. He's just not like a high standard wrestler.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way of putting it. Now the thing was that before last year, they put Zion in matches that went way too long. Like they
Hmm.
finally got the idea and have definitely been way more careful with him. And it's really, yeah, it's not dragging it down.
And I think that is also like when we're talking about like what are these guys chasing? Like New Japan has, this big roster and it has all these guys that work on all these shows, but so many of them are like just like train wrecks, not even from like a talent perspective, but just from a booking perspective, where you just have so much of these guys that have been cast into these really limited roles and everything is extremely formulaic and repetitive and it's just a tough watch and I just find myself like I'm like, oh, okay, I'm gonna skip this match, like, oh, this Red Narita match, I'm gonna skip that. um and I think like these other promotions that I watch, like in All Japan for example, like I just don't feel that way about it. And I think that hurts New Japan a lot, that like, yeah, the high end stuff on New Japan will still hit really well, but there's so much crap on there. It's this really high variance. Where All Japan, there's definitely a lot of wrestlers in All Japan that I'm not a huge fan of, but when I at least watch the show, I at least am not like repulsed by what I see.
Um, well, I think, and I think I've said this before about New Japan, and yeah, we could say someone like Shota Umino hasn't lived up to what was expected of him. And some even people say that about Yota Tsuji, but to me, the biggest malpractice isn't necessary, and I don't want to understate, and I don't want to like understate, the consequences of losing Naito and Okada and Tanahashi retiring. But to me, the biggest offender, and I think I was when I did the quick clip thing on your show, my point was like Geto's got to go, and I think the most egregious thing about New Japan is the booking, even if some of the talent hasn't quite stepped up yet. That is to me the biggest problem.
Mhm. And let's go back in the time machine here. Seeing how New Japan has handled their young guys and things like that. If we go back in the time machine and Yuji Nagata gets his wish and Yuma Anzai ends up in New Japan, like as a young lion, instead of staying in All Japan, like how do you think his career unfolds? And do you think New Japan would have handled him well? Do you think he'd be as advanced as he is right now if he was in New Japan? Do you think he would have this like burgeoning star power if he was in New Japan? I don't think he would, and that's kind of crazy given how much of a bigger platform New Japan has. I think he'd be like fucked up because that's what happens to most of these guys. They're booked at a snail's pace. They're given a stupid gimmick. They're, put into some sort of, hellacious cycle where they're feuding with the same guys forever and ever. Usually House of Torture. He'd be given like some weird like nickname or something stupid like that. Like there's just so much that can go wrong now. And I just like even a guy who you feel like is like an obvious slam dunk prospect, anybody could understand that this guy has talent. I feel like New Japan would have messed up Anzai if he had gone there.
I think that's very possible. I think he'd probably be in somewhere in like the way that Umura is right now. He maybe would have ended up in like just five guys or something
Yeah.
like right and playing second fiddle. Maybe he would have gotten a title shot by now. But also it's like crazy. Like all these guys like Umura and Yota Shuji, like they debuted in 2018, which is
Yeah.
crazy if you think about what was going on in New Japan in 2018. And like you said, it's a snail's pace and everything like that. Um, so I
Well,
think that's sort of like the thing is like where he might not even be barely out of the Young Lion stage or like wrestling in Europe somewhere or something right
yeah, he'd
now.
be coming back from excursion, like
Yeah.
after like yeah, disappearing into Europe, like CMLL if he's lucky. Um, and yeah, and like okay, like part of the reason Yuma Anzai is the way he is and why we talk about him is because he came up during a time where All Japan was really desperate for new top talents. They had Kento Miyahara, they were moving Aoyagi along, and then like after that, they're kind of like, geez, we really need some like new blood on this roster. And they were lucky enough to get this guy into their system who was an obvious elite prospect and because they needed him, he got pushed really fast, really hard, really fast right away, which is great because he's, cleared the benchmarks that you'd want him to have, and now you're in the position where he feels like, he's really on the upswing. He's already had like a world title run. He seems to be getting more comfortable from a charisma perspective. The Bachelorette thing seems like it's going to really help him at this point in time. It definitely seems like things have really worked out for him, and it just in New Japan, it's hard to say like it working out nearly as well, given all the different systems and how slow they would have been, and just Gedo's booking patterns.
Yeah, that's the biggest things. But it's interesting though, because like obviously like the idea of like necessity is the mother of invention. I think that's the saying. It's like that hasn't dawned on anyone at New Japan though, right? And it's strange that for whatever reason that hasn't even dawned on anyone in the executive suite of Bushiroad either, just to say like, hey, why don't you just take one of these guys and push them? This is
Yeah.
Bob
Well,
has
it
been.
somehow works in Stardom, which is run by Bushiroad.
That's true. That's true.
Um,
But they give him a lot of leeway, right? And I think the fact of the matter is, maybe one day Taro Okada will be as crappy as Gedo, but as a booker. But right now he's in his peak years.
yeah, and we could talk about Joshi as well because I do think that at least I don't know nearly as much about joshi as I do about the other promotions.
Hmm.
And some people say, well, that's not saying much, but like I get the sense from afar. I'm not a regular joshi viewer. I
Well,
can't.
Jesse, let me say this. You do know a thing or two about the other promotions, and I will absolutely defend you on that because, look, I'll be honest here, and I hope I don't offend anyone, but with the with how big that New Japan got in like the 2010s, like there was definitely a lot of people that then self-styled themselves as Japanese wrestling experts when they were dedicated New Japan fans, no question, but they somehow felt that that gave them the authority about to know everything about Japanese wrestling with watching very little in terms of other promotions and that. Like,
Yes,
so
and
you're
yes,
doing just fine.
it's literally like the literally the same phenomenon as like the person who's a wrestling expert but only ever watches WWE.
Yeah, exactly.
Which for a time when and that's one of the reasons AEW has broken so many brains is because now like they actually might have to know something about non-WWE wrestling and they can't handle it and it leads to all sorts of bizarreness. Um, but my impression, at least from is that like I think a lot of fans frustrated, a lot of like the fans you're talking about, like the fans who really got into New Japan in the 2010s, a lot of those fans who are frustrated have kind of switched over to becoming Joshi fans in a lot of ways. And I think one of the main reasons is that Joshi is like the main promotions like Stardom and Tokyo Joshi
Mhm.
Pro do a really good job of creating new stars, elevating people, presenting people with crowd connection in a way that New Japan is kind of lost. And I think that is at least I couldn't speak to it, domestically, of course, but I think from my perspective, like Western fans, a lot of them have found themselves gravitating towards Joshi because it's scratching the itch that New Japan can't provide.
Absolutely. Especially with Stardom, it's like new fans or sorry, new stars, but also like relative ease of watching, although they tend to do more pay-per-views than New Japan does. Plus, just the production values and everything like
Mhm.
that. It looks like a top flight product, right?
And with especially Stardom, Tokyo Joshi Pro has kind of its own separate vibe to it that maybe
Yeah.
makes this a less of a good point. But like you watch the Stardom shows and pretty much top to bottom, you're gonna see like pretty high quality work. Even in its current state, like if you were like a New Japan fan, you're like, oh, maybe I'll watch some All Japan or watch some Noah. You're gonna watch some matches and you're gonna be like, oh, these are like either like really old, broken down wrestlers or just people that just can't get it together. And that's not really the case if you turn on Stardom. If you watch like a big Stardom show, pretty much everyone is going to be like a pretty good wrestler, if not better. Which I think if you're like coming from a peak New Japan background, that's kind of what you expect. But if you're like turning on like one of these Noah shows and you're like, wow, there's like a lot of really old guys on here, or all Japan, and like you're like, like I don't know if I really need to see, um, these matches with these guys who were like in their 50s, and that's just not the case with the Joshi promotions for the most part.
Yeah, for sure. They especially Stardom has like pushed, but then I mean, I don't know, is this a good thing or not? But like they've also benefited from some of the like older in relative terms, either leaving or retiring, which has helped, even though Joshi has that sort of rep unfairly that the women are sort of
Hmm.
well, they were forced to retire very young once upon a time, but they a lot of them still do tend to retire a little younger, and I do think that that does have an effect on renewal.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when we talk about that, we'll talk about like I don't know. Did you participate in the 30 under 30
I did.
Crash X, which I believe is getting released this week, which is probably coming out as people are listening to this podcast. I think that's the schedule. I'm not positive. But like when we talk about 30 under 30, like it's going to be Joshi heavy. And I think one of the reasons is because like what you just said, like the culture around it is there's not actually a ton of pushed Joshi wrestlers that are over the age of 30. So if you're looking at like who are the top like promotions that have top stars under the age of 30, it's going to be the Joshi wrestlers for the most part. Um, and I think that also helps like people cycle through quickly. We're not going to ride these people until they absolutely collapse physically. Like there's, I think the historical composition of the way a women's wrestling promotion in Japan is booked is much more considerate of like elevating people quickly and getting people into the main event and getting them ready, as opposed to New Japan, which has really taken the opposite perspective. Unless you're someone like Callum Newman.
Yeah, it's strange. Like uh, Callum Newman, but it's like Gedo has lost all his. It's funny he pulled the trigger because he lost all of his big foreigners and Zach. I love Zach, but like he just wasn't it, I guess. Um, so he just decided to do this, but why he couldn't do this with some of the native talent just boggles the mind.
Yeah, I was thinking about like I like Callum Newman. I think what they've done with him is exciting and something that New Japan needs to happen. But like if I was like I'm a huge like Bolton Oleg fan, and I just like wish that they
Mhm.
went all the way with him instead of just kind of keeping him in this kind of like mid card territory.
The thing is, I said to people who were like, when as soon as they saw Bolton, they were like, "Oh, this guy is gonna be huge." And I said, if this was 1982, he would be a main eventing Sumo Hall and all across the country against Antonio Inoki. But I don't think New Japan in the 2020s is necessarily going to make him the uh, sort of foreign ace or sort of foreign dojo guy ace like they did with like Kenny Omega or even what they were going to do with Prince Devitt and what they're doing now with Callum Newman. I just don't think that that was ever in the cards because I would make him the top foreigner in New Japan, but like my preference is for more old school type booking, whereas they want a more, I don't know, dynamic, flashy guy. Even though, Oleg can do some impressive things.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where I come down to where I wish the creative effort that's been put into Callum Newman would have been put into Bolton Oleg, which they haven't really done. It's like Newman, like we're gonna have him kickstart the, restart basically the United Empire. We're gonna give him his own faction. We're gonna give him a new nickname. We're gonna give him all this stuff. We're gonna put the title on him and like really, really concentrate and put this effort into him. And if you were to ask me like who's a better prospect, who's someone that I feel like is a more capable main eventer right now, and it's like I think Bolton, especially because I think Bolton his weakness, I think, right now is that he doesn't necessarily have the best crowd connection and like persona. And I think that like kind of all the dressings that they've done with Callum Newman would go a long way with a wrestler like Bolton Oleg. Um, but that's just
This,
kind of like
this,
what I've been thinking.
but Bolton Oleg does not need a stable. He just needs to kick ass, right?
I wish he had a stable of like other ass kickers. And they
Okay, that's
just
fair.
suplexed everybody in New Japan and reestablished the identity of this as like the most physical type of wrestling in the world,
Right.
which it's just not. I think you raise a good point though, like what they're looking for in a top guy, and it's like, especially with the foreigners, they really like flashy guys. They like you know you know Prince Devitt and Kenny Omega and AJ Styles, and like obviously those guys are all really good. Of course, you like those guys. Um, I don't know if Newman is on that level yet, but he's obviously worth someone worth investing in. And we shouldn't be I shouldn't be knocking him too hard for doing the thing that I've been asking him to do for a long time.
Yeah, I like him too, but I mean, I actually a lot, and I think that he unfairly got a lot of shit thrown on him uh, early on, and I expected him to do well, given his pedigree and his training from Osprey. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I don't know if he's necessarily the guy to be in this role.
Who in New Japan right now? Let's think of Kento Miyahara. Close your eyes and think about Kento Miyahara working a big Kurakan Hall show. Just think about that for a second. Who in New Japan right now do you feel like has the best crowd connection?
Dodo,
Probably, right?
yeah,
Is there anybody like Kento Miyahara?
no,
Yeah, that's just bizarre to me. And obviously, like Kento's been in All Japan for a really long time, and in New Japan has had guys that are like Kento, but they've gone to other promotions and things like that. So there's some of the stuff they can't really control. But I've been thinking about that more like. they're guys that I like in New Japan. They're guys that are pushed as main eventers, but I feel like there's a real lack of people that the crowd really feels connected to, especially when you watch kind of almost any other promotion in Japan. Like even ones that aren't as good as New Japan or have like their own kind of issues. I watch them and I'm like, you know what? The crowd comes alive in like DDT when some of their top guys are working. Or
Yeah.
certainly in like Stardom or like in Tokyo Joshi Pro and like their top stars there. And like even like a guy like Ozawa has it in NOAH. And in New Japan, like I like Yota Tsuji. I think he's a really talented guy, but he doesn't have that crowd connection that like the real top guys have. And I feel like a lot of the guys were just kind of like faking it and pretending like they're the top guys, but they don't have that kind of crowd connection that defines it. And maybe this isn't the best example because it's not really main event acts, but I've been watching this Best of the Super Juniors tournament, and the only guy I think in the entire tournament that has like a star level crowd connection is Jun Kasai, who of course is not a New Japan wrestler and is instead like, a Japanese indie wrestler. And somehow he has a better crowd connection with presumably the New Japan fans. Obviously, they're in Tokyo and things like that. There's obviously big Jun Kasai fans in the audience because he's, wrestling the main event of these shows. But Jun Kasai is the guy who comes across to me like, oh, this is a guy the crowd really likes. They're the guys that get chants and stuff like that. But Jun Kasai comes across like a top guy. And I just don't get the sense that there's anyone in New Japan that comes across like that right now on a consistent basis.
No. Especially, I mean, the junior division is also barren in terms of crowd connections beyond El Desperado. But I mean, Watto has been a big wet fart. What have they done to beautiful Doki? And then Show and Yo are also has-beens, which is crazy to think that they didn't. So yeah, I mean,
Can I say something about Yo really quick? So I'm watching Yo versus Robbie Eagles, which is a fine match, by the way. And like I'm listening to Walker Stewart on commentary, and he keeps calling Yo the direct drive. He's the direct drive. Oh, this is a big moment here for the direct drive. And I'm like, what the fuck is a direct drive? And I'm told it's the name of his finishing move, which I knew, which is fine, I guess. I don't. Like, there's a difference between what his finishing move is and what his nickname should be. And then, like, I guess, so do you know what a direct drive is, Gerard?
when I hear that, I think of almost like baseball, like a line drive or something. Like that's the first thing that pops in
I
my head.
was thinking of like a USB drive.
Okay, yeah, that
Like
makes
you
sense.
you put it in and it's, got like a virus on it or something like that. So a direct drive is apparently like a popular kind of contemporary way people listen to vinyl. It's like a record player. Um,
Okay.
and that makes sense because I know that's kind of Yo's like character, and he had his own little produce thing called Yo's Needle Drop that was on New Japan World, which I watched a little bit of, regrettably. Um, and it's the name of his finisher, which is fine. But like, why is Yo's nickname like a record player? Like, is he a human record player? Is he an anthropomorphic vinyl player? Like Hiroshi Tanahashi is the ace, right? He's the ace of the company. That's who he is. Kazuchika Okada is the rainmaker, right? He's this rich, arrogant guy. He's the rainmaker. Shinsuke Nakamura is the king of strong style, right? Those are like nicknames. Why the fuck is this guy's nickname the Direct Drive? Doesn't make any sense. And obviously, like there could be like something lost in like the cultural transition between Japanese and American, and it actually makes sense to Japan. But just as a fan for myself, watching English commentary, Walker Stewart's like calling this guy the Direct Drive. I'm like, what the fuck is that?
I'm not. I know there's obviously things lost in translation, but I'm not convinced that Yo is lost in translation. He just really likes records. I think LPs.
Yeah, and his finisher being called the Direct Drive is fine. especially because I forget if it's like a driver, but it probably is. But like, it makes sense, right? That's a fine name for a finisher. But like he's supposed to be a person. His nickname is the Direct Drive. It reminds me of when like John Moxley was in WWE and his nickname was the Lunatic Fringe. And I'm like, that's not like a description of a individual person. That's like describing a big group of people. But they kept calling him the Lunatic Fringe. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Anyway, that's my yo take for 2026.
Yeah, that should be the only yo take you have all year. You've
That's why
never
I'm
said
that's
that.
why I'm getting it out of the way now. But like, yeah, in the junior division, like I would say like Noah's junior division is kind of good. I would say All Japan's is really limited. Um, so and like obviously like I think like when I think of juniors in Japan, you think of Dragon Gate. Um,
Yeah.
and Dragon Gate kind of has its own issues. I think for like the 2010s, like Dragon Gate was the closest to New Japan in terms of the consistent, strong product.
Yes.
It's had kind of ups and downs since then, not unlike New Japan. Um, but in Dragon Gate is much better, pretty much than any of these other, pure, male promotions at least. At like introducing new guys, pushing new guys, giving guys characters, giving new guys stables, like elevating those younger guys. Like they do a much, much, much better job than New Japan or really any of these other promotions do. Um, but they're, a very almost like a unique case where they have their system. It's existed for a really long time. There's a consistency to it. They are, taking advantage of the fact that a lot of these guys are overlooked because they're not very big, and that's still a huge focus when, Noah and New Japan and All Japan are looking for top stars, right? They're probably starting with the measuring tape and the scale as opposed to other things. Um, but obviously, like Dragon Gate has a lot of these things that we wish New Japan had. But to get to like the junior division in New Japan, we're talking about the best of the Super Junior, which is ongoing. I think one of my main issues with it is that there are a lot of guys that I think are good in the junior division, but there's really what feels like very little established hierarchy as opposed to like who's the top guy in the junior division right now? It's got to be Desperado, right?
Yes.
And he's kind of like I like Desperado's a good wrestler, and he's managed to get over. I feel kind of like him the way I feel like Zach, where it's like this guy's really good, and we should all respect his work, and the crowd certainly likes him to a degree. But he's kind of like the top guy by attrition, not because he's like singularly phenomenal. And that's kind of I feel the way where like Zach's like a really really great wrestler, but he's not really a top like ace performer in a apparel company. Um, And like I think like if you were to think back like to Hiromu Takahashi when he was at his peak, or like before him like Kushida, like there was just kind of these obvious established top guys that were excellent at the top, and then there was like guys who were kind of beneath them, like some exciting foreigners, and then there was like some drop guys. And I feel like they've moved the junior heavyweight championship around a ton in recent
Mhm.
years. It seems like everyone gets a turn with it, and there's not a huge established hierarchy to any of these guys. They're all kind of like fit into the same thing. Like I like Robbie Eagles. I think Robbie Eagles is a really good wrestler. I've enjoyed his work a lot, especially I think he's been one of the standout performers of the best of Super Junior so far. And he's been a guy that has at times been pushed as a top junior in New Japan, but it's never been with any consistency. So it's hard for me to really buy him as like someone that's going to have like an amazing tournament and it's going to like really define his career and help him go upwards. It just seems like, oh, he might have some good matches, but that's what he's been doing in this company for 5 years.
Yeah. Well, same sort of thing. Dynamic is that I feel like there's like Eagles disappears for stretches for too long, and
Hmm.
I don't know if that's him only wanting sort of like a quasi part-time schedule or that's a New Japan call. But like, look, they could just belt up Kosei Fujita, like stop with this Doki run. And the fact is that El Desperado got way too many reigns in the last couple of years, which seemed to be a strange, like, we got to make it up to you because we had you slotted below Kushida and Hiromu for all those years. So let's, with all due respect to El Desperado, I think he should have gotten his moment in the sun, but it should have been shorter. And, right now, Kosei Fujita should be the champion.
Yeah, I think Fujita's the obvious like guy who would be the heir apparent to like the Hiromu Takahashi position, which is like this guy's the best junior heavyweight we have, and he's the benchmark in this division, and he's gonna hold the title most of the time. And when someone beats him for the title, that's a sign that we believe that person is a potential top star for this division. Instead, it really feels like, your typical like mid-card belts you would see in like American promotion, like a WWE passing around the tag team titles or like passing around the women's title, where just kind of like anyone that hangs around long enough will get a run with the title, and like nothing really feels that significant when anything happens. That's how I feel about the junior division right now, even though there still are like a lot of good wrestlers and there's a lot of good wrestling in it.
Yeah, and I mean, again, like Doki worked hard. One of those guys that stepped up when they needed an extra body. I can't remember who. Someone was injured, and then they brought him in back from Mexico. And I have no problem with him being a champion and getting a little reign, but again, like they decided to, turn him from a baby face into whatever the hell he is now.
Yeah, when his appeal was also like kind of that he was this underdog that kind of backdoored his way into New Japan after having to go to Mexico to learn how to wrestle. Um, And like that was like a very like fun underdog story, and that's why he was over as a babyface enough to be champion. Like you turn that guy heel, he kind of loses that interesting aspect of his career. It's like, all right, so now this guy is just like a shitty cheating heel, and he now we're supposed to take him as seriously as a top guy. It just doesn't really work for me.
And it's just one of those little things that accumulates when you like sort of like give the finger to your fan base and all of these little things. It eventually will, I don't think the dam has completely broken or burst for like a full-on revolt of the fan base, but like it's little things like this that make that more inevitable.
Yeah, and like All Japan, like I know they just did kind of their junior tag tournament. Gimmick. Like they don't really have a junior heavyweight division like on the roster. It seems reliant a lot on outside imports, which, to be honest, isn't that bad because they're getting some pretty good guys, like, especially with a lot of the Dragon Gate guys coming in and working, and you also have, like people like Fuminori Abe coming in and doing these matches. So there's some real quality out there as opposed to just relying on like the bottom tier guys in your roster who are, under 220 pounds.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. It's not really a division, but they've got it to the point with their like couple of their guys like Atsuki Aoyagi and Rising Hado, plus the outsiders that they use where, they could actually have like good title matches.
Yeah, they're not relying on like the same two guys going out or just kind of like bottom. Like when I first started watching All Japan, their junior division was really rough, and it was just like a lot of these guys with either weird gimmicks or like could you I think it's like Ultimo Dragon that in the mix a lot like in the
Yeah,
2010s.
Ultimo
Yeah.
Dragon was in the mix of the 2010s, and like as recently as like 2018, you were getting like, or like 2017, I think it was, you were getting like these 20-minute Ultimo Dragon versus Yoshinobu Kanemaru matches
Yeah.
as like the title matches in All Japan, and that has completely shifted,
Yeah,
thankfully.
and it's like if we're gonna bring in these outside guys, like let's bring in some exciting guys who are, either they're in Dragon Gate or they're coming out of the Indies or Overlook guys, and the result is like some pretty decent stuff. Like the fact that they put together a junior tag tournament and it was
Yeah.
actually pretty good, um, is like pretty impressive for a company with its resources and given the limited roster and talent availability and all that stuff. Like I don't know if New Japan's, they still have a lot of good wrestlers. I just like like we talk about their singles junior division, like who are like the ace junior tag teams. It's like just the same kind of few names being shuffled around, I guess.
Akira and
Jacob
oh,
Austin. Yeah.
TJP left. I
Yeah,
forgot.
no, no, not TJP anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Who knew that his departure would be such a blow to the junior tag division?
When we look at the All Japan roster right now, we talked about like the top four guys. But to expand that conversation a little bit further, who do you see as like the most logical person in All Japan to kind of step up and be like the fifth guy? Or when Go Shiozaki inevitably breaks down, or Yuma Aoyagi becomes crazy, or Yuma Anzai becomes a professional reality TV show contestant. Like who would you rate as like the next logical like guy on the rise in that company?
Um, next logical. Well, they I can't remember his name, but they've got this guy in the dojo that's a judoka and
Okay,
whose
yes.
father is a semi-famous comedian, has like mainstream appeal. So he's going to get a push when he debuts, which will probably be later this year. I have no doubt about that. I don't think he's not as I mean he's not as like got the looks that Ansai does or anything like that. But that's the thing. But if I had to pick someone, I would go with Ryuki Honda. However, I would also circle that he has some unfortunate also Yuma Aoyagi characteristics where he's become a bit of a too much of a goofball for his own good as well.
Yeah, well, Honda feels like he's been on like the New Japan track where he's been around forever and he's been a prospect forever. And he's still only 26, but it just feels it's like, all right, what do we actually have with this guy? It feels like he's honestly, and this is probably a good example since they're both Wrestle One guys, he just kind of feels like the younger version of Ashino, where it's like, we're never really gonna go all the way with this guy. You
Right.
know, we might tease him a little bit, and he has some of the tools that we look for. Like he's got good size, he's got some charisma. Like that stuff's there, but like we're never really that serious about him, which is how I feel like they've handled Ashino for his entire time in All Japan.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I don't. There are times when I thought they were going to pull the trigger on Honda. I mean, they sent him to the finals of the Royal Road tournament three
Hmm.
years in a row, which is why I kind of think that he's going to win that tournament this year. Which is an accomplishment for him, no question. I mean, the crazy thing is they had Ren Ayabe win that tournament before Honda did. Eh, but so to me, he's the most logical. Will he and is he ready for it? That's debatable. I'd want to see some him like mature out of his goofiness. But when he's on, like especially his matches against Anzai, which they've had in the Champion Carnival in the past, have been just awesome. So I think he could do it if he wants it. But will the company have it, and will he smart enough? Well, that remains to be seen.
Yeah, man, it's just kind of strange because as we talked about, it's like not like during his time in All Japan, they've just been like bursting at the seams with exciting young talent.
Exactly.
Like you think that he would get the chance. Like another one of his he hasn't I guess he has been around as long, but like Dan Tamura is another guy that has a lot of similarities. He's not as big as Honda,
No.
um, but he's like one of those guys where like I feel like for the last 3 or 4 years, be like, all right, Dan Tamura breakout year, and it never really materializes. And I don't know, you're a closer viewer than me, so I'm curious like what your take is on him and like what maybe has
Well,
been holding him back.
I think Dan is great. I think that Dan has a crowd connection, but I think Dan is a junior heavyweight guy, and he's got a title shot coming up. He might win. I don't know. But yeah, I think being one of the dominant forces in the junior heavyweight division is his destiny.
Yeah, and that weird junior heavy division that we talked about.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and then so in terms of the other top
Here's
guys,
the thing. Of all of the companies in Japan, there really is a height penalty in All Japan more so than there is in Noah, especially Noah, because all those guys were really short. Like Gedo is very short, and
no, I mean in Noah they're open to, you know,
yeah,
they've
and
kind of always been that way in a lot of degrees. I mean, not when they first started, but like
yeah.
that's like, that's Kenta's, promotion.
But if you ever watch those interpromotional shows, like even Kento and Yuma Aoyaki are like taller than like most of the other guys in the other big stars in the other companies. And this is why they bring in guys like Odyssey and Talos. And this is why they also give Ren Ayabe a push,
I was
even
gonna
though he
say,
has absolutely zero crowd connection. And this is why Shido spins his wheels. And why, I say Dan's just going to be a dominant force in the junior heavyweight division. And that's his peak.
yeah, Ayabe's a really like I was about to say, right, Ayabe's a really interesting guy, which is what most people say. I'm still like keeping an open mind towards Ayabe. He doesn't have uh like any charisma,
No.
which is a problem. And he doesn't wrestle with like most of the time he doesn't wrestle with any intensity. And he's also not really that good as a wrestler. So those are three pretty bad things to be going for you.
Yeah.
Um,
I think his like the his nuts and bolts fundamentals I do think have improved, but that's not going to go very far unless your charisma dramatically improves, which it hasn't. I mean, you could maybe make a case there's been a slight improvement of that, basically just sort of like sponging off of Talos's aura because he
yeah,
knows how
when
to actually project himself as a big man. But that's like the nicest things I can say about Renayabe.
I just think with any tall guy, we've seen this actually, and there's many cases of this. It just takes a long time for them to click, like as a wrestler. I think some guy people that come to mind, like um, you know, Big Bill, right? Took a
Yeah,
long time. Took a long time for Lance Archer to kind of put
absolutely.
it all together. He was like 40 when he started being actually really good. So, like, if he just keeps grinding away, I think, and obviously, like you said, there's like he's getting pushed and protected to a degree because of his height.
Hmm.
Um, and in Japan, like, he's got to be among the tallest native Japanese wrestlers I've ever seen. Like, outside of, Giant Baba, he's probably the tallest.
Active right now, yes.
Because he's what? He's probably like a legit like 6'6", 6'7".
They list him as 6'7".
Yeah, but obviously, like, yeah, he's like working with Talos, who I don't know how
Yeah.
tall Talos really is, but he's obviously a very tall
Talos is
individual.
probably 6'10".
Yeah, he's listed at 7 feet, which is a wrestling 7 feet. And now I'm looking at his cage match page, and it says his background in sports is football. How did this guy not play basketball? Um, anyway, um, but they have these. I don't know. I'm kind of like Ayabe never needs to be pushed right away, but I'm still kind of relatively interested in him. Um, and then we have the guys that have kind of defined All Japan, which are the Saito brothers. Um, how are you feeling about the Saito brothers right now?
Well, it's weird because I expected Ray Saito to be a lot worse in the Champion Carnival than he was because he's returning from a shoulder injury, and this has now seemed to become a shoulder. This is not the first time he's been out with a shoulder injury, and I think that's going to be one of these injuries that nags him for the rest of his career. So it was a pleasant surprise. Like, I'm not saying he set the world on fire, but he definitely exceeded my expectations. June's singles run has ended, so they're going back into their tag title contention. They're going to be challenging in Sendai in sometime in June coming up for the titles. So I assume they're going to win them on their home turf. So that's really good for them. I think sliding them back into the tag team division is good after their singles one that didn't light the world on fire. It seems to be some of the Saito mania has cooled down, and
Yes, that was kind of like a turning point for the company in a lot of ways. Was the Saito brothers kind of like something that like was just like incredibly unexpected, like from when they debuted, and they just looked so like clueless and bad that they would end up being like a top act in All Japan, but they absolutely were.
yeah, I think they're better as a top act as a tag team than as singles.
Well, I
Um,
think it plays more as like the Saito brothers than like
yeah.
Jun Saito world champion. But I'll give Jun credit. I got to the point where I kind of enjoyed some of his matches as champion, and everyone knows I'm a huge Saito disrespecter, but I think that he's done a pretty solid job as a singles wrestler. Um, he's
Yeah,
far exceeded my expectations. Um, Rei Saito is one of my least favorite wrestlers to watch, and just like genuinely like very unpleasant experience.
yeah, well, the thing with what I'll say about Jun Saito is they left the title on him way too long, but I
Hmm.
did think that he improved as the reign went on. But even when I thought the matches were getting better, it was like he's just been champion for too long. They left him on him for too long. So I do think that like he improved from that. I have a soft spot for Ray because when someone pulls a great match out of Ray Saito, it's a lot of fun. But yes, I get that he is not always going to deliver.
I just don't like looking at him.
He does
Like,
look, you know.
yeah, like I just him and Bad Luck Fale are like the two guys that when I see them in the ring, I'm like, oh man, this guy. And I think Ray Saito has a lot more capabilities and a willingness to be capable than Bad Luck Fale does at this time. Where I think Bad Luck Fale is probably the worst wrestler in the world, in terms of like someone whose match I might actually watch. Um,
Yes.
but Ray Saito is just really tough. I will say I kind of liked in the 1 minute match that him and Hideki Suzuki had in the semifinals. I thought that was played very well, even though it's
Yes,
literally
it
a
was.
1 minute match. And it probably doesn't say a lot that like the match I'm praising for Ray Saito only lasted 1 minute, but um, and Hideki Suzuki randomly, he wins Champions Carnival. Do you think he's going to win the title?
Um, I think he might, and I say that because I think you got to sort of get that Triple Crown onto Anzai pretty quick to capitalize on his Bachelorette fame.
Yes.
Um,
So this is like a real thing now. Like he is
yeah,
like they sold they what did they do? They had a great crowd.
they
Um,
did 3,000 in Oda Ward Gym
mhm.
for the
That's
Champions
sure it
Carnival
is the
finals.
Ibarra Wave
Oh,
Arena.
sorry. Yes, you're right. You're right. I'm sorry. I'm still getting used to that after calling it for over 20 years Oda Ward. Um, but so they did 3,000 there. They hadn't drawn 3,000 there in over a decade, probably going back to 2013, 2014. Their next Corkin sold out like a week after it was announced, the card was announced, um, which is unusual for them. And most of their spot shows for June are either sold out or close to be selling out. So, and just the number of followers that Anzai has dramatically increased. I think someone said his like Twitter followers doubled. So like obviously I don't have like these business metrics to be like it's all Anzai because you could also say that the company is a lot more focused and I think booked better than it was like this time last year. But it's probably mostly Anzai and you got to take advantage of that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like if the how legit it is. It's very favorable that like it's a guy that they really have already been pushing as a top exciting young wrestler, and it would be like really funny if this was like Ren Ayabe, like who got over on The Bachelorette, and now it's like okay, we got to belt up Ren Ayabe.
Well, I mean, Red Eye Abe would have been eliminated from on the first episode, so
He's very tall though. Uh,
he is very tall. But I mean,
in
come on.
dating, like he could put that on his profile and be like, "Whoa, that guy's really tall." Um, let's talk about Noah. I don't really want to, but let's do it anyway. Like Noah's company like, as a company and like its roster and just everything about it is an extremely strange promotion. Um, and what does Noah have, especially if we're talking about like is how can Noah, relate to and catch to all New Japan? Okay, Noah has financial resources that like all Japan doesn't have, right?
Yeah.
Noah has a huge ass roster. Like All Japan keeps things pretty lean and it's a lot of outsiders. And I don't know how many of these guys are like signed to Noah deals, but you look at like a Noah, like a major show, like this past like Korakuen Hall show, that not Korakuen Hall, Sumo Hall show. Um, right, that was at Sumo Hall, the show from like the start of May.
The one where Shane Hayes won the title,
Yeah, yes.
that was Sumo Hall.
Yeah, okay, so that's Sumo Hall. Sorry. I didn't want to I don't want I didn't I was either Sumo Hall or Budokan, I didn't know. Um Anyway, but like you look at like the card, it's just like all these different names and stuff like that, and it's just such an odd promotion. But they have resources to at least I don't know rival New Japan, but they can compete. They're not as cash poor as pretty much any other pro promotion is at this point. And they have kind of this relationship with WWE that's like very strange, and they've got just a wacky roster of people, and you've got some like really interesting, especially like their junior division's kind of really interesting. Um, they bring in Naito for shows, but also like Shane Haste is the number one is the world champion. Like it's a very, very odd promotion. Um, like from a business perspective, how would you say Noah is doing in 2026?
Well,
Start
here's the
there.
thing. N- I thought their Super Hall number, I think was four something. I think that was decent for what that card was, kind of. But they're going down in Cork, and even with GHC title defenses, I think it was Kenta versus Shane Haste drew only 1100, whereas this time last year they were drawing like sellouts at Korakuen for those Ozawa defenses. So that's a real clear decline, right? We might have thought. I mean, Noah might have peaked. I thought the Ozawa era was the start of something new, and I have my issues with how they've handled this and how Team 2000X has just become completely overplayed, total House of Torture territory. But now the business is beginning to suffer. I think Shane Haste has had great matches, but he's clearly not a draw either. So that's not helping things.
He's Shane Haste. He's slapjack. Like
Yeah.
he's not a top guy.
Did you
And
watch the match against Inamura?
I haven't. I really want to
Okay.
because I actually kind of like Inamura.
I do
Um,
too.
I know I don't watch him enough, I think, to really understand like what I think a lot of people have issues with him and some of the things that he does in the ring. Um,
It's the gimmick and the speaking English and the promos and
yeah, he's really goofy, wacky character. There's definitely like a WWE vibe to
yeah.
Noah in some ways. Um, and I'll tell you this, I love the way Inamura sets up his finishing move, the bouncing on the ropes before the big splash.
Yeah.
That's like it's such a simple thing, but like gets the crowd really into it, like hypes up like what is ultimately just like a splash from the top rope. I love that shit. Um, but you mentioned Ozawa, like so we're talking about like this time last year, a little bit before that, like Ozawa was this like kind of this guy that kind of came out of nowhere in a lot of ways and was this very charismatic figure. And when you saw him, you're like, wow, that's what Japanese pro wrestling is missing. Not just Noah, but everywhere. Like this young, exciting, like incredibly confident um pro wrestler. And he just like and they booked him, they made him world champion, they gave him his own stable, they did all these things, but there's just like a goofiness there, I guess. And the way that they've just kind of decided like, okay, Team 2000X is going to be a cheating heel stable and it's going to happen in like every single match. And also he's going to have a lot of dead weight partners like Yoshitatsu. Um,
Yeah.
it's just not it feels like his stock has lessened, which is kind of unacceptable when you consider what kind of prospect he was considered to be a year ago.
Yeah, stock is lessened. Some of that got dragged down because, well, the biggest match that Noah could have done was Ozawa versus Naito, and they did it, and it was not good. To the point where even Naito's getting turned on by the Noah fans, and Naito is like way worse than Tanahashi was at the end. No question in my mind about that either, right? So that sort of like is, I think not helping Ozawa. Strangely enough, everyone thought, oh, well, this is going to be a big help. I don't think it's helping him being associated in feuding with Naito. And he probably, like, the title gave him direction that he needs. But the thing is, then you just get all of this endless interference in these title matches. So he's been booked into a corner, I feel like. And it's obviously very cliche to just like, bounce him out of Team 2000X, but I think that's what they might have to do to make him interesting because it's just going to be like if they do the same thing they did his first reign, it's going to be completely just run into the ground very quickly.
Yeah, it's it's just such a bizarre company from like a so yeah, so Naito is this big thing. Naito is on paper a huge get for Noah, right? He's arguably the biggest drawing card in Japan from like a domestic perspective.
Hmm.
Uh, he's a huge star, a legend in the business. He just doesn't have anything left physically.
No, and like the Noah crowd has turned on him in a way that Muto never got boos like this when he botched stuff during his run. So I don't know if it's the Noah fans don't want to deal with the shit again, but they put up with it Muto the first time, but they're not going to let it happen again or something like that. But I mean, the thing is that Muto altered his style over the years in a ways that Neto just seemingly has refused to do so. So it's even more glaring, I think. And he is, to me, worse than Muto was for a lot of Muto's last run in Noah, and definitely worse than Tanahashi was in Tanahashi's last year of wrestling. I mean, it's bad.
Yeah, well, Muto also had like kind of like everyone knew this was kind of it for Muto. So there was like I think more respect for him than there is for
Mhm.
Naito, even though it looks like this is probably it for Naito.
It should be. I like honestly, it should be.
Like, but like, and also Naito, is a New Japan guy. Um, I know Muto obviously was a New Japan guy, but had basically been a working all over in every wrestling promotion like
Yeah.
for 15 years before deciding Noah was going to be the place that hosts his final year. Um, and so maybe that's fact, but it's like it's kind of weird. It's like, all right, well, we definitely got to push Naito. And because we're pushing Naito, I guess that means we kind of have to push Bushi too. Where does
Yes.
Bushi rank in like all time like wrestler like hanger-ons? Like on a scale of like the Brutus Beefcake scale.
Oh, like where 10 is Brutus Beefcake and one is, I don't know.
No one's supposed to get like a one, but like people know what I mean when I say a 10 is a Brutus Beefcake when we're talking about the scale.
I think he is a five or a six, maybe. I mean, he had a career before Naito. I mean, he debuted in All Japan and then went uh, to um, to New Japan. So he sort of had a career before Naito and he did have a career before Los Ingobernables. So, I mean, look, I mean, at the same time, Naito clearly needs someone to do the jobs and everything like that. So it's not as egregious. I mean, yes, somehow the Bushi is now a heavyweight tag team champion in Noah, but until he wins, like, I don't know, the national title or starts winning singles titles in Noah, I'm not prepared to bump him up higher than a five or a six on the Brutus Beefcake scale.
Yeah, honestly, it might be a little unfair for Brutus Beefcake to be a 10 on the scale because like you could argue that he was charismatic enough to kind of like be a mid-carder in WWF and like no one was like offended by it. But it's more like the spirit of like he kept getting work because like he's Hogan's buddy.
He
Um,
did well. He also made event at a Starcade because he was Hogan's buddy, right? So
um, the Good Brothers would rank highly on that, but weirdly enough, the Good Brothers AJ Styles, the person they're usually hanging on, is not in Noah. Um,
okay, could I just say something? And might sound ridiculous, but the Good Brothers, at least for now, we'll see how things change. They've been working hard in Noah. Mind you, it's not a lot of matches so far. That could
I
change.
believe Carl Anderson has been working hard. I refuse to believe that Doc Gallows is working hard.
I mean, by Doc Gallows scale, I mean he's taking some bumps and stuff.
I was gonna say, how many has
Again,
he taken a back bump?
yes, he's taken a couple. My thing is, I just, like, how long is this going to last? Is a completely other question.
Are they in WWE still?
No,
So they got
they're in
released.
NWA. They're in NWA and
Yeah, okay. So they got
no,
released. But were
yeah,
they I think were they still in WWE and they were when they were still in WWE were they working some Noah matches?
no, they came in after their release.
So they were never part of like the WWE talent share.
No.
Yeah, but like I said, it's just like a weird roster. So you got like the Good Brothers and like Tetsuya Naito, and you have like all these kind of like a lot of like wrestlers from Mexico. You've got these like UK guys coming over, and these other European guys. You've got some other outsiders just kind of like popping in, and then you also have like like your Mohamed Yones and like your kind of like long-standing Noah guys on the roster. It's very, very strange roster right now. And it's kind of a roster of a company that has money to bring in people, but no clear booking direction.
Yeah, I mean, this is all speculation, but we like, and I chatted with this in the Noah channel of the Voice of Wrestling Discord. But we think that Noah did get a bit of a cutback in their budget because they're running fewer larger buildings, and they've turned over a bunch of foreigners and used generally, with the exception of a couple of exceptions, are using a lot of like just random European indie guys that are going to come pretty cheap. Now they haven't trimmed on the production, but there are some signs that maybe their budget's a little smaller. But I don't think it's anything fatal. To me, it's the booking that is the main issue there.
Yeah, I mean like using Wrestle Universe is awesome.
Yeah,
Like as a user-friendly app, being able to jump into certain matches, trying like if you're like me and you're like, all right, I'm gonna parachute in on this random DDT show. Like DDT is a promotion that I enjoy, but I really only enjoy like the heavyweight kind of like main event stuff. I do not like have the time or energy to deal with like
uh,
the goofy DDT stuff, which
here's
I'm
here's
not.
the thing. A lot of DDT shows start at a reasonable time if you live in on the East Coast, so they'll start at like 10 or 11 at night sometimes. So I will just put it on the background and let it run until like the main event comes, and then just watch the main event.
Yeah. But when I'm like, usually it's like I heard like, oh, you should see this match. It's really good.
Mhm.
And that's when I'm kind of going into DDT and like being able to just kind of use the way their app is set up to find it is really, really nice. But I like a lot of the DDT like main event guys, or at least the guys that when I see them wrestle, I'm like, these guys are really exciting. Like I like Mao. I like how do you, I don't know if you pronounce his name Cannon. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, Canon.
Kanon,
He is
Kenan.
really great. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I placed him on my 30 under 30, and I haven't seen like a
so did
ton of his
I.
work. Um, the other guy who's, again, I'm going to butcher his name. Is his name Toy? Toy?
Oh, yeah, it's Toy. It's Toy.
Yeah. Because originally, I think his name was like originally his name's like Toy, and because it's weird Japanese wrestling, his name is now To hyphen Y.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, Toy Kojima was is his shoot name.
Yeah, so they have these guys that I really enjoy watching like when they get those main events. They've had some really fun matches that I've really enjoyed this year. Um, I can give off a few recommendations for the people. I know people really care about my DDT recommendations. Um, on January 3rd, we had an excellent six-man tag match between Toy, Yuki Ueno, who's one of my favorite wrestlers right now in Japan,
Yeah.
and Kasei Takechi, who I don't think a lot of people know this. And Kasei Takechi, I believe he is a boy band star,
Yes, he's in an idol group, boy band group, and he is a draw.
and he's a pretty good wrestler.
He's a
Like
pretty good wrestler.
I've put him on, and I'm not like I didn't really know that he was like this. Like I put on the match, and I was like, this guy Kasei Takechi is pretty good, and I'm like, oh my God, he's only got like four career matches, and it's like, oh yeah, he's like a celebrity wrestler, and I was like, you can't tell.
No.
Um, But Yuki Ueno, Toy, and Takechi versus Kazuma Sumi, Kanon, and Mao is a match I recommend people check out from the January 3rd show. These are all on Wrestle Universe, in case people are wondering. Um, and then from the same show, this was Takechi's second anniversary show from February 22nd. I also enjoyed Kazuma Sumi versus Takeshi Masada. And then, of course, the main event of that show, which was Takechi in a singles match against Yuki Ueno. Really impressive work by Ueno to get that match out of Takechi. I know we just said Takechi's good, but to have like an actual good
Yeah.
long singles match with a guy with limited experience. I think Ueno is um, like maybe the most, and I might be mispronouncing his name. I don't know.
No, that's
Um,
you. Yeah.
yeah, like I think he might be the most underrated like wrestler in the world. So that's like a loaded statement because you can point to like guys who were like working like mid cards in Mexico that are just like really rock solid and no one ever talks about them. But in terms of guys that are working like long main events, I really enjoy his work and I feel like nobody talks about him outside of the people that are like, your regular DTT viewers.
No, I agree. He has acquitted himself very well as the DDT. I mean, he's basically their ace right now. I don't
Oh
think there's
yeah, yeah, no, totally.
yeah.
Because
Uh,
of the unfortunate retirement um of Takagi.
you mean Higuchi?
Yeah, I don't know. I for some reason I just confused him with Sanshiro Takagi for some reason. I have no idea. But Higuchi, who I've written about before, is like the one of like the last traditional Puro heavyweight champion style wrestlers. So is he officially retired now?
Yes, he his neck was all messed up,
Yeah,
and like that's something that like really like has sapped my interest in DDT.
yeah.
Uh,
Um, Yuki Ueno versus Kanon from DDT Judgment Day from March 22nd. Or yeah, March 22nd. Also a match I recommend everyone check out. Um, but I've really enjoyed that stuff. I can't really talk that much more about DDT because I'm skipping a lot of their stuff. But when we talk about like crowd connection and like having wrestlers that feel like they're on the upswing, I really do enjoy what I see from them.
yeah, they put together a pretty good, quietly like a pretty good young core there. I
Yeah,
mean,
like all these
when
guys
I
are
think
like either
Tony
30 or under 30. Like Ueno, I think is 30.
like
But
31, 32
yeah,
top, right?
but like
And
Kanon, Mao, Toy, these guys are young.
yes. And Masada is clearly their next ace guy that they're grooming, I think.
Masada.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
haven't
he also looks
seen.
like Takeshita a bit. So,
It's funny you mentioned Takeshita because I was thinking about Takeshita earlier when we were talking about like when I was saying like what would happen if like New Japan got Yuma Anzai at that young age, and it's like they did have Takeshita who was like basically what they wanted. Like he's just like one of the best wrestlers in the world, young Japanese wrestler, and they like kind of like didn't know how to book him at all, and really got like the least out of him in a lot of ways. And that was like in hindsight like a really troubling sign for this current booking team that they got a guy who is like literally a slam dunk guy and they just like really awkwardly booked him and his character so that they got like the least out of him that they could possibly get.
yeah. Yeah, to be fair to New Japan, do you think though his AEW relationship also harmed him in the eyes of the New Japan fans?
Oh, like obviously that came into it, but like that could have worked if they just like booked him consistently as like this super arrogant outsider, right?
Hmm.
Instead, he kind of like he did that some of the time, and the other time he was more like a tweener, and then other times he was kind of like even like a baby face. Like obviously, he wouldn't be like you couldn't book him necessarily as like the ace of the promotion, but there was a way to do that that they failed to do.
Hmm.
Um, and it was pretty concerning, I would think.
Yes, definitely. Like it should have been a slam dunk even because Invader storyline very common, but maybe they just should have read the room a little better with what the New Japan fans wanted, and maybe they could have done this without him winning both the G1 and then the title right away.
Yeah, and New Japan has been in some ways when we talk about like New Japan being the top pro promotion, the trendsetter, the promotion that all of the other promotions are chasing after, all of those things. The detriment of that is that it is by far the most notable promotion to Western audiences, which is actually a good thing in a lot of ways, but has led to it being far more suspect to being picked apart by AEW and WWE both in terms of looking for their top talent, especially any foreign talent
Hmm.
that comes in. Like, uh, but you can see like the wheels turning. Like it's like we saw Okada jump to AEW as a native Japanese star. There's
Yeah.
probably going to be more that either go to WWE or AEW. Like we saw Evil is now in WWE, which like I don't think anyone's shedding any tears over. Um, although I talked to Jay Michael on this podcast, back a couple months ago, and one of the things he pointed out was he's like, "Look, like I know everyone shat on Evil and everything like that, but like we're gonna see what House of Torture looks like without Evil, and maybe like Evil will get some more respect." And he's kind of been correct so far.
Yeah, no, Evil is a very good professional wrestler, saddled with an awful gimmick. No question about that. I always enjoyed Evil. I think he actually kind of might do well. I mean, I could see him actually doing. I'm not like confident in this, but I could see a world where he does well for himself in WWE because, he's a good wrestler and he's got a gimmick. So
Yes,
I think that could.
I kind of thought that as well. Like he's gonna have a really limited ceiling in WWE. The fact that he's starting in NXT kind of tells you that he's probably not going to be, you know, getting too many singles pay-per-view matches anytime soon.
Mhm.
But if you're just like, if you need a guy to come in and do a lot of like goofy mid-card, like multi-man tags and kind of chaotic, walking brawls and all this kind of goofy stuff that WWE likes to do, especially NXT, like that's kind of in his wheelhouse.
Yep.
Like
If he wanted to do the what is it, the Wyatt family thing, basically
the
use
Wyatt Six.
he,
Unfortunately, the
yeah,
Wyatt Six are no more, but yes.
right, but he could do his own version of the Wyatt family or something like that
Yeah,
as well.
he could get some weird NXT stable. They've got all sorts of. I don't watch NXT, but my understanding is they've got all sorts of random shenanigans going on back there. So he
Yeah.
honestly, in that regard, he fits right in. And like the thing with Evil is like it's like like the aggregators will write like former IWGP World Champion signs with WWE, and like they'll point out like that's the title AJ Styles had, and that's the title that Okada had, and it's like okay, this is not that guy. You're not getting like an ace Japanese pro wrestler that was regarded as one of the best wrestlers in the world for a long time. Which is kind of what you might expect you're getting if you've never watched like New Japan before and you're a
Yeah.
WWE fan. You're thinking like, okay, this guy's got to be one of the best wrestlers in the world because he was a top guy in New Japan.
Yeah, no, that's not what they're getting. But he technically might be still one of the best wrestlers in the company now in WWE, given what they are have
I
right
mean, in
now.
NXT, he's easily one of the best.
Yeah, yeah,
I
no
mean,
question about that.
yeah. With when I was thinking about like in the other thing with New Japan, we talked about Evil departing, we talked about Tetsuya Naito and like and Bushi. Sonata left and now he's back. I don't know why Sonata came back. It just
Hmm.
but New Japan does feel like they started to cut some necessary dead weight on the roster. Um, I'll be interested in seeing if Jeff Cobb comes back. Like to me, Jeff Cobb, like okay, like you can bring in Jeff Cobb and he's gonna do like a solid job, but he's not elevating anything. And is that where you want to dedicate resources to? And I think that's kind
Hmm.
of been a problem with New Japan is that they've been really one of the reasons they've been really reluctant to push new guys is because they've been really loyal to guys who have been there for a long time.
Yeah.
And through whether it's because they were making a lot of money or they wanted to try something else, they got in a huge fight with the booking office, whatever it happened that led to some of these guys like Naito leaving. Um, that's presented an opportunity for some of these younger wrestlers, and I'm wary of that going away if they continue to rely on like let's bring back Sonata, let's bring back Jeff Cobb, like do I think we've seen the last of Naito in New Japan? Probably not. Like I'm worried about that happening as well.
Yeah, I like Sonata's not going to get signed away by AEW or WWE. Um, for all we
Yeah,
know,
it's how come Evil gets signed but not Sonata? That's kind of odd.
well, Sonata seems might be a little broken down more than Evil. He never got that, like, I think it was a torn bicep treated, and he might have had some other nagging injuries, maybe his neck as well.
Oh,
But
yeah, can he not pass the vaunted WWE physical?
I don't know. People thought he was going to go to Noah, so I don't know if maybe New Japan actually tried to like be aggressive and trying to keep him, but I have no clue.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, Sonata's failures feel more self-imposed than like booking wise. Like they
Yeah,
tried with Sonata. It just
they
wasn't
did
that.
absolutely.
It just wasn't there. So I
Yeah.
can't really criticize them for that. They gave and maybe they should have given him a better stable name than just four guys, just five guys. Um, like if you're gonna do a stable like that, it has to be almost like ironically simple, but like so like but like ultimately they try to push him and he just doesn't have the charisma as a top guy. Um,
Mhm.
and that honestly is New Japan's problem. Like all of these guys that New Japan has, these younger guys, I think in the the way the dojo system goes, like they're pretty good wrestlers, but they're missing that charisma, which means they ultimately kind of are missing that crowd connection, which kind of puts a ceiling on how good you feel about these matches.
Right.
And that's kind of where at this point, like I think like if Yoda Tsuji like I think Yota Tsuji's a really good wrestler. If he had like incredible crowd connection, the way like previous top guys in New Japan have, I think he would be regarded easily as one of the best wrestlers in the world. As opposed to a guy right now, I'd say he's like, yeah, he's pretty good, but he's probably gonna finish like 40th on the FSM 50, as opposed to in the top 10. But if he had like a Naito or Nakamura level crowd connection, he'd be like having like a bunch of five-star matches because the crowd would be super hot and they'd be into the stories that are being told in the ring. I just don't feel like that's the case right now with most of New Japan. And I do feel like you get that sometimes in All Japan and even in Noah, which is why I kind of proposed this original idea, which is that like I just think that gap that New Japan used to have isn't there anymore.
No, it's the gap is mostly gone. I probably think the hit rate for main events is high, still highest in New Japan, especially with the way that Noah now has, has like all the
Yeah.
like now
Well,
Noah
that's
has
a
more
big point.
interference in the main event than New Japan,
I
you
know what you're
know?
getting at. Like but like with New Japan, it's like if the House of Torture guys are involved, or even now it
Yeah.
seems like the United Empire guys is like you're waiting for that interference and the ref bump or whatever's
And
going to
that's what
happen.
Noah is now
Yeah,
too, right?
yeah.
So
So you're waiting for that. Like if we're gonna get like Zack Sabre Jr. and Hiroki Goto, you're like, all right, yeah, this is probably going to be a really high hit rate. But if it's like a lot of other guys on the roster that are getting that shot. At least in all Japan, if you just were to take like their top four or five guys, you'd be like, okay, at least I know that this is going to be like a regular wrestling match, and we're not all just waiting for the evil heels to run in and get chased off and things like that.
yeah, I mean that's something that really feels like the way that I mean, I will take a victory lap that I thought this was going to happen all the way back in like January of 2025 when the Ozawa thing started. Well, I said that this could go off the rails very quickly if they doubled down on this, and they did double down on it, right? So that's now where we are, and Corkin attends is slipping, which is your best way of telling how healthy a company like Noah is. So that's sort of like was the inevitable thing, and it's a shame that that's now crossed into Noah. So it's just like I don't even understand like what like I want to know what the more meta thing going on with these is like why does Noah do this? Why does New Japan do this? And why, I mean, Stardom has eight and they had a Oedo tie before that. Like, why has this become such a cliche in Japanese wrestling now?
Yeah, I mean, I've screamed about House of Torture and just like the lack of creativity. It's the same spots every time. Um, it's been going on for years and years and years. It seems like we just as if you want to enjoy New Japan Pro Wrestling, you just have to accept that this has to exist. Like Gedo and Bushiroad, they just think we gotta have a cheating heel stable, and they kind of gotta be involved in a lot of stuff. Like you cannot have a wrestling company without that. This and like it's like saying you need to have a world champion.
Mhm.
Like, you need to have that. And I don't know why. I don't know. And if it was, they were doing huge business in Japan, I'd be like, well, maybe I just don't understand. Like, it's not for me, but it's clearly connecting with their audience. But just feels like we're getting continuing diminishing returns with this strategy. Um, and there's also some other things. Like, I'd tolerate it more if the cheating heels were like actually good wrestlers, but they're mostly shit. Like, they're guys that have completely given up. Um, and that honestly is probably the biggest thing in New Japan that drags their shows down when I talk about like those matches being a bore. It's just like I feel like there's just a lot of guys that I've given up on, and it feels like they've given up on like trying to be good.
Show
Because
has, Ren Narita has, you know.
yeah, like Sho, Yo, Ren Narita, Sonata when he was there, but now when he's back, like, Fale, um, just all these guys are just like couldn't like don't want to be good wrestlers anymore. Like
Mhm.
it's just and it's sad because some of these guys are pretty good. Like some of these guys, like I think like Ren Narita was a good young wrestler,
Yes.
and he's been given this gimmick and this role that like just totally disregards any of prior skills that he might have had and teaches him to be this crappy wrestler that shouldn't give a shit about a lot of things. And that's ultimately what it is, and that's
He
really
would have been
disappointing.
he would have been better off just developing as Shibata's mini me and then
Yeah. At least he
finding
was
his
having
own way
normal
out.
matches. At least when he had a
Yeah.
match, I wasn't like, oh, okay, here's the Ren Narita match here. When's Dick Togo gonna run out with the Groat Wire?
Yeah. Well, I think we'd be remiss if I was on this podcast and we didn't also mention Jake Lee.
Oh, I didn't even think about Jake Lee.
I know. Who thinks about Jake Lee? Exactly, right? Just I mean, I don't know if he's got a big contract or something, but I can't even believe New Japan brought him in. Um, he he didn't click in All Japan as Triple Crown champion. He didn't click in Noah as the GHC champion. He's now in New Japan. They clearly they gave him a main event earlier this year, challenging Suji. So they have plans for him. I just don't know why that they're doing this instead of like, you know, steal someone better away from these companies in Japan. It
He's
just bothers me.
tall, very tall.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, honestly I feel like the Jake Lee stuff is already they've already kind of lost some interest in him, I think.
I think so too.
Because they brought him in and I think they had expectations for him, and then he gets injured and he's out for a really long period of time. And then they're kind of like, all right, let's bring him back. And like they tried earlier this year. They were definitely like, all right, we're gonna give Jake Lee some serious stuff, and it didn't really work and didn't catch on. And I think now he's gonna find himself into like the shitter hole, which he's probably already in. Um, where he's like, all right, we'll put him in some maybe he'll win the tag titles and stuff like that, but I don't see him ever getting like a big singles push in New Japan. Of course, crazier things can happen, and we could be here in a
Yeah.
month, and Jake Lee is the world champion. But
Never doubt as someone leaving or getting injured or something like that, and opportunities open up.
what if he like just like was amazing? Like, wouldn't we
Well,
all
then,
have egg on our face that like Jake Lee finally put it all together, and we're like,
well,
oh damn, like
I guess so, but I think he's given us enough to be skeptical uh, about that. But if he does it, then he does it, and then we're all wrong.
yeah. Gerard, do you have anything you want to plug?
Yeah, just the Emerald Flow Show on the Voice of Wrestling Podcast Network. We regularly cover New Japan or sorry, not New Japan, All Japan and NOAH, as well as we dip into Zero One, we dip into Big Japan actually quite a bit because I like what they're doing with their strong division, although I'm not going to watch a whole Big Japan show. We also dip into DDT. So, but All Japan and NOAH are sort of the core of the show, and we like to survey what else going on in men's companies in Japan as well, though.
Yes, if you want to hear people talk about Noah and All Japan, but don't constantly saying, "Am I pronouncing his name right?" like I did, you should check out the Emerald Flow Show right here on the Voices of Podcasting Network. But thanks so much, Gerard, for joining the show. Thank all the listeners, and we'll talk to you again after a while. Bye.
Hi, I'm Case Lowe, co-host of the Open the Voice Gate podcast. The one question I'm constantly asked when it comes to Dragon Gate is, how do I get into the promotion? Well, stop asking and start listening to the Open the Voice Gate podcast, released every Wednesday on the Voices of Wrestling podcasting network. For exclusive news and show reviews, look no further than the leader in Dragon Gate coverage, Open the Voice Gate.